process, if we have this 3 days, at what time do I have to?
At the end, you wouldn't touch until the end. That's only in the 3 days. In the 3 days, likely the mind has gone. So you check first here,
Yes.
and if it's gone, it's gone. 3 days is usually it's gone. It's not longer than 3 days. But if it's, so usually the 3 days, you don't do this one. You don't need to, because the mind probably has gone.
At all.
I'm suggesting it's probably because the mind has already gone. The point to do this is to help the mind leave the body. But if the 3 days is there, it's usually by 3 days has already gone.
But if I stay with this person during these 3 days,
Yeah. If you what?
and
If you what?
I am around,
If you're with the body for 3 days, then the question is then.
do I have to do when and what? At what
Okay. Do you know why you want to do this? What's the reason to do this? To do what?
To help to leave consciousness from.
Right. So you wouldn't do it in the 3 days because you don't want to touch the body.
Okay.
No, you don't want to touch the body. You don't want it to go. You want to let the mind stay there as long as it wants. The only reason to do this is to force it, because the body has to go sooner. But you don't have to touch it for the 3 days because the mind will already leave itself.
Okay.
That's the point of the 3 days.
Yes.
But to make sure before you do move the body, you check here.
Yeah.
And then if it hasn't, then you do this. But it's most unusual. Usually 3 days it's gone.
Okay.
That's the point. Yeah, okay. Someone else, something else. Any questions? Of any kind? So far? Yes.
So we've been speaking about the death, which lasts, or like the process of dying, which takes about 2 hours.
Well, it's don't be too concrete about that. This could be around something like this.
But what if we're dealing with an instant death, or let's say
Yeah.
a violent death?
That's right.
Well, how does it happen in this case?
It would happen the same, but it goes quickly. It's like if you can walk down a building on the ladder, it takes time. But if you fall down, you go quicker. You still fall down the same way, but it's quicker. Do you see? It's quicker, that's all.
But so when the person is dead, then the mind has already left, and we cannot.
No? What do you mean by dead? What's dead?
For example, the person is shot in the
Yeah, it
chest.
doesn't follow. Usually, okay. Everybody who dies goes through the same process, but it can be taking like a second. There's no awareness there, that's clear. Usually when it's a violent death, it's like that. That's all. It goes quickly. The same process, and it could be that usually when it's a violent death, the mind could even leave the body immediately. Yes, that's possible. More than likely that, because it's very shocking, you know. Are you sure? Are you clear the point? What's your real question? I can't quite get it. What's your real question? Or have you had the question answered?
I probably had an answer.
Okay, all right. Okay.
And at this case, we can't help. And
Okay. In general, as I said, the karma that will determine your next life is already triggered even before you stop breathing, right? So for the person who is dying immediately, like they're breathing, they're eating their dinner and they drop dead. There's clearly no process. So it's a question of what is in their mind at that time that triggers the karma. It all happens very quickly, you know. So then already let's assume the negative karma is ripened. Let's assume. So then, not ripened, but triggered. So then by that point, the mind will then be either in the body or it will already leave and go to the intermediate state. So by the time the karma is fixed, it's usual that is the karma that will ripen. That'll be the type of rebirth. But as Lama Zopa says, depending on the person, if they have any merit, if they have any connection with lamas, certain practices can help change the karma in the intermediate state. It can. It's doing things like this jangwa, doing other practices, very powerful practices, it's possible to help. Often it's already determined, but it's still possible to help, depending on the person, if they have merit, if they have a connection with a very powerful lama. Do you understand? Many other things could help. It's possible. Yeah. And all this is in the book, all the explanations.
okay.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Just a quick question. The book is about to come?
Okay. No. The book, the manuscript has been given to Wisdom, and they don't want to publish it like this, the way I've done it. They want to change it. And they will take another year or year and a half to have it in the shops.
Okay.
One point. The way I've done it, which is more for practitioners probably, I don't know, it's going to be available online on the FPMT website as a PDF, the whole book that you can download for free.
At the moment?
Not yet. Very soon, coming, like in a month.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, and I think then it's up to the publishers. Wisdom will deal with the translation rights, so foreign publishers can contact Wisdom, but this one is available already, can be translated, or the people, if they prefer the Wisdom version, which will be more like for the public, they won't present it the same way. This can be more for the public, which will be in the shops and things. But this available one will be in about a month online as a PDF for free. Yes.
Irva. Haluaisin kysyä yhdestä käsitteestä.
She would like to ask about a concept.
Spirits.
Spirits.
Sitä olen tavannut joskus buddhalaisissa teksteissä.
She has seen this concept in Buddhist texts.
Ja kun olemme ryhmässä tehneet Chittamani Taaraa,
and when they've been doing the Chittamanitara in the group,
sielläkin mainitaan tämä käsite spirits.
Even there the concept of spirits is mentioned.
Mitä sillä pohjimmaltaan tarkoitetaan?
What is meant by this concept?
Okay, I'll talk about it now. It's the next step in the Lamrim, coming on from thinking about death. Okay, so we've described the death process, and if we're looking at the Lamrim, we think about death and impermanence to prepare us to want to not waste this precious life. So the traditional next step in the Lamrim, which for us in the modern world is a very weird thing to think about, is given that I could die at any moment, given that I've got lots of karmic negative seeds in my mind, and I don't know what karma will ripen, it follows logically I could take a suffering rebirth. Right? This is the logical conclusion. So then here we think about the suffering, as they put it in the Lamrim, we think about the suffering of the lower realms. So we mentioned briefly yesterday Buddha's view that how there are these different states of billions of consciousnesses existing in the universe, billions and trillions of sentient beings. They would even say in Buddhism that there's not an atom of space where you won't find sentient beings. Wherever there is existence, there are sentient beings pervading everything that exists in all the different elements, in the biscuits, in the chocolate, in the water, in our body. Everywhere there are sentient beings, all kinds. So as we can see clearly, there aren't just humans and there aren't just animals, So we've got these different realms of existence we mentioned briefly yesterday. So they're all psychological states. Beings existing with their own particular kind of appearances of experiences, own mental states, and their own level of type of physicality. As I said, the Vajrayana model talks about how all consciousnesses have their own set of the four elements. So depending on the karma that ripens at the time of death, this karma that's triggered, let's say as a human birth, you're dying, but you die with a lot of negativity. You've spent your life just being, a regular guy. You've spent your life killing and fishing and cheating on your wife and bad-mouthing people, normal human being. We're not talking about being Hitler here. And so you've never thought about impermanence, you've never thought about morality, you die with really freaked out, negative karma is ripened, your killing karma ripens, so that throws you into a type of suffering rebirth. So if you virtuous karma ripened in our case, which threw us into a human rebirth. Another type of positive rebirth you could get as a result of virtue is what they call a God realm. As we know, the Christians talk about heaven, the Muslims talk about paradise. It's a type of sentient being, and their physical energy is like subtle light. And the experience of it is very blissful. But from the Buddhist perspective, it's a true state of being. Certain beings have this as a result of a lot of virtue, but it's not a very useful rebirth because you just bliss out for a few eons and then the karma runs out and then you're finished again. So there's not much help. But it's a state of being. There are types of sentient beings called God realm. Then you've got humans. Then you've got the three states, the three realms of existence, each of which is the predominant energy of the three root delusions. So the one we can see a lot of, is the animal realm. So a person who's, let's say, born a human dies with negative karma ripening due to their habit of killing, let's say, or just whatever. No awareness, die with a lot of fear, a lot of grasping. This activates a negative karmic seed, and that throws them into a rebirth in a dog mother's womb. So they get their very subtle consciousness and their very subtle wind energy conjoins with a dog egg and sperm. So they get a dog body with a mind that goes with it, which is predominantly incredible ignorance. And the ignorance we're talking about is the same ignorance we all have, which we talked about yesterday, this ego grasping. But for animals, it's 1 billion times more strong. total primordial grasping at a self that gives rise to very powerful attachment, which gives rise to very powerful aggression and aversion and all the other delusions which we can see in animals that humans have. Buddhist psychology refers to all living beings, not just humans. You look at a dog, you look at a monkey, you can see the same delusions, but much more powerful. Jealousy, sexual attachment, greedy at food, aggression, anger. You know, look at them. You can see it's the same delusions. The same model of the mind applies to them. But the trouble is, for animals, that's predominant of delusions that have ripened. They can't access their virtue. They can't access their wisdom. They can't access their intelligence. They can't access much compassion. They've mostly got delusions. You can see them. Animals live in incredible fear, incredible paranoia. But we don't see that. We might see animals we don't like, so we think they're disgusting, but we see our cute little poodle and we think it's wonderful. But as Lama Zopa said one time, you know, if you could see directly, if you could have a direct experience of the mind of your normal little dog, the suffering would be so intense. You couldn't bear to waste another second of this precious human life. But you think of your dog, we don't think of suffering. Look at your cat, we don't think of suffering. We just see this cute creature, or we see a disgusting creature. We don't see their mind, you know. So the state of an animal's mind is intense, unbelievable suffering, mainly based on the predominance of this huge ignorance, which is what causes our suffering. But we have some access to virtue, which is why we have some access to some sanity. But animals have no access to their virtue. They just completely follow their delusions, completely follow their instinct of delusions, killing, raping, being killed, being harmed, living in total fear, therefore suffering, therefore harming each other. Look at animals, you know. Then you've got spirits, this next lot. This word spirit is not used in the same way that we use it in Christian teachings and others, completely different. The word spirit is used in the West equivalent to the soul. Nothing like that here. A spirit is a type of intensely suffering being. There's a type of spirit referred to as a hungry ghost. And the predominant energy of the spirit realm, and there's many kinds of these beings, is intense grasping and attachment. 1 billion times more powerful than our attachment, but the same energy, the same delusion. And their mind is conjoined with like air energy. So they don't have any stability. So they rush from here to there. They've got the most intense suffering minds. And many of them can be very powerful and very harmful. There are all kinds of spirits. Buddha Lama Zopa talks about, the teachings talk about being very powerful beings who are born as spirits, but are incredibly harmful, like can influence the weather, can cause sickness, can cause terrible things, you know, can cause terrible harm. Intensely suffering beings. But there's billions and billions again and trillions of these types of sentient beings, which aren't visible to our eyes. But many people who are clairvoyant can see them, you know. And many people in the West, many humans and animals who like go crazy, it's because they are possessed by these spirits. Many people talk about hearing voices. They're hearing voices. They're called spirits who are literally living in their body, you know. And that means you've got strong, like in the same way that you meet certain human beings, like I said about karma yesterday, you have a karma to have a lousy mother, a good father, a horrible next door neighbour, the mean rat that eats your house. This is intense karmic history with sentient beings. Well, you can also have karmic history with beings who are born as spirits. So let's say you've got this very powerful negative relationship with somebody, always harming each other, and one of them dies. Well, they can very likely be born as a spirit who will then literally possess you and interfere with you and harm you, cause you sickness, cause you to go crazy. This is very common. You go to your Tibetan doctor, by looking at you and feel your pulses and look at your urine, they can tell if your sickness is caused by spirits. A common way that spirits harm is by causing sickness. This is a Buddhist view. So spirits are intensely suffering beings. And if they have a connection with us as humans or animals, they can do very harmful as well. There's many stories about being possessed by spirits. And one of the causes of it is intense attachment, dying with incredible attachment to something simple, you know. I mean, there's this one amazing Lama called Geshe Lama Kontrok, who was a close friend of Lama Yeshe, who lived, after he left Tibet, he spent like 30 years living in caves where Milarepa lived, you know, this great Tibetan yogi. And there's many right up in the mountains in the border of Nepal and Tibet. There are many of these great caves where Milarepa lived, and he lived there for many, many years. And he was this great yogi who spent the last 20 years of his life, after all his meditation, he spent the last 20 years of his life at COURTIN monastery, Lama Yeshe's monastery, Lama Zopa's monastery in Kathmandu. Anyway, there's many stories about him as a great meditator. Lama Zopa said that he was a great practitioner of Vajrayogini, like he lived in Vajrayogini's pure land, as Lama Zopa put it. And so he lived in these caves, naked, no food, no sleep, because he didn't need it. These great yogis can by completely controlling their minds, being able to go to the subtlest level, they can also completely control the physical energies, the elements, the internal elements, and therefore they can control the external elements. So that he didn't need sleep, he doesn't need food, and he doesn't need clothing, because he can generate his own heat, and they can live on the energy of the air. These beings, they're so powerful, so realized, you know. Anyway, I was writing for a while his biography, but then it got stopped for whatever reason. But he's one of these amazing yogis who spent when he left Tibet, spent like the first 7 or 8 years in one cave. Several caves anyway, and then eventually he met the local villagers and he started to teach them and start monasteries and things like this. And because these great yogis they're clairvoyant, that's very low level, you know, they're clairvoyant, got emptiness, all these other realizations. They can do extraordinary things, and one of the common things they do is they can see spirits and they can remove spirits. You know, in the Catholic Church they call it exorcism, isn't it, you know? And so, of course, the Christians say that all these beings are like the devil, whereas the Buddhists would say it's just spirits, a certain kind of being who's got intense attachment, and then due to some karma with a certain human being, they interfere with that human being. And the commonest thing is they're attached to something that human being has got. So there's one story, it's funny really, but it's sad, you know. This is how spirits work. This particular there's a nunnery up where he was meditating, up in the mountains. And one day one of these the nuns came up to Geshe-la crying, saying, one of the nuns has gone crazy, you know. So he said, oh, don't worry, I'll help, I'll fix it. So first of all, he was at about 12 hours away and he had to walk down the mountain. But because he is able to manipulate the energies of his own physical body as well as his own mind, they can also, like I said, manipulate the energies of the physical world, because it's all made of the 4 elements. So he's able to run on the, you know, like they can fly or run on the air, you know. So he gets there very quickly. He runs on the air, gets to the nunnery, and then the nun is in the bed, and she's possessed by this spirit, right? And then already, as he's walking in the door, the spirit, and never mind all that. So anyway, he comes in and he goes to the nun, and the nun's got this being inside her. This is how they say. And so the point about the spirit, because they're mainly attachment. And he's in that nun because the nun has got something belonging to him. Because with attachment energy, when you're a spirit, you know, in a dream, 1 minute you're here, then you're there, then you're in the sky, then you're flying. It's all over the place. It's very strange in dreams, isn't it? There's no sense of time and space that we have in our human body. You understand that? Because your mind is disembodied in a dream. You haven't got a gross physical body in your dream. It's your subtle mind. And your subtle mind is conjoined with wind energy. So, you know, as soon as you think something in a dream, you're there, isn't it? So that's what happens when you die. Your subtle mind, there's no gross body right there. It's conjoined with the subtle wind energy. So as soon as the karma ripens, and I might have died in Africa, and there's my mummy and daddy in Melbourne. Well, there's no time. I don't have to climb on an aeroplane to get to Melbourne, to her womb. I mean, I see her, and next second you're there. Because there's no space and time the way we think in the West, you know, and you haven't got a gross body. Your physical energy is like air. So so in a dream, it's very uncomfortable sometimes, because 1 minute you're here, then you're there, because you're driven. The air energy pushes you. Do you understand what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. So spirits, their mind is conjoined with air energy, and it's very suffering. There's no sense of clarity, and it's intensely painful because you're driven by attachment, craving this and craving that, you know, all the time. But look at us. You think of a cake, before you know it, you're driven to the fridge and they're driven to put it in the mouth. Well, we've got this big fat body in the way. If we didn't have the body, you know, it'd be okay. But the mind, they say in Tantra, the mind rides on the winds. The mind is inside the subtle channels with its own wind energies. And we've got this big body to lug around as well. But you haven't got a big body, then you've just got the wind energy. And when it's attachment that drives you, it's very intense. Can you try and imagine what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. So these spirits, driven by craving, driven by frantic attachment. And it's intensely suffering. So there's this spirit in this being, in this nun. So Geshe-la can see, because he's clairvoyant, and so he says to the spirit, this is what they do, what do you want? Why are you here? What do you want? So the spirit goes, I want my pink thermos with the white flowers. I want my pink thermos with the white flowers. And sure enough, there it is. And they realize, oh my God, the villager who died recently had given this nun a thermos of tea, and she forgot to give the thermos back. So he's upset about his thermos. He's attached to his thermos, you know. Okay, he's a poor fellow. His thermos means something. But attachment to anything, you know. So he dies with this attachment. So because he's born as a spirit and he's obsessed with his thermos, for God's sake. So he possesses the nun to get his ridiculous thermos back. I mean, it's not laughable. It's sad if it's not laughable. Do you understand what I'm saying? So there's millions of humans and animals possessed by spirits. People who go crazy. I mean, I have emails all the time from people who are hearing voices. They're completely going crazy, being possessed by these terribly suffering beings whom they have some karma with, who use their body, to do harm. It's like a nightmare for some people. It doesn't follow if you are schizophrenic that you are hearing voices. It could be your own crazy mind. But it's not uncommon, the Buddhist one, that it is beings literally possessing you, So anyway, this particular nun, because Genla knows who the spirit is, it's the local villager. And so and the villager knows Genla, because you can see. So then it's so poignant actually. The spirit then is crying, saying, I can't find my way. I can't find my way. It's very vivid, because if you're a spirit, you have a thought and you're there. You have another thought, you're over there. There's no sort of sense of space and time and clarity, It's like a nightmare, the suffering, like a nightmare. And this is a very mild kind of suffering, this type. There's many kinds of spirits. And it's because of attachment you're born into that realm. So anyway, because he knew who the spirit was and Genla has the power, he was able, one of the things they do, you remove the object, which is the connection, so that he was able to use the object to give it away and did prayers and things and help the spirit leave and hopefully get a decent human life, But there's another story when he was in Kopan Monastery, during one of the courses, this one girl kind of went crazy and Genla said, yeah, she's possessed, And he said, you'll find something in her luggage the spirit wants. So they found this Jewish object. She said she was Jewish and her father had bought this thing in a second-hand shop. Well, I tell you, I even have worries about second-hand shops now. You go buy an antique, you're bringing the spirit who owned it with you, who wants their thing back. So this spirit's possessing this poor girl, making her crazy. And in this case, and I've seen it very many times, the lamas often use this very fierce methods to get the spirit to go. And so one of the things you do first is you've got to get rid of the object, because that's keeping the spirit there. That's what they want. So you throw the object away as far as possible or do something. And then I've seen this happen. Genla picks up a shoe or something and he's whacking this girl, beating the spirit, threatening him. We know all about you. There's nothing for you to go here. You go now. You leave, This can often be a way they get rid of the spirit. It's very funny when you see it. But sometimes, apparently, Lama Zopa would always use peaceful methods, and he would spend hours and hours cajoling with the spirit to try and find a method to give them something to make them happy so they'll leave the person, It's very funny. Different stories like this. So there's some spirits, okay? Clear?
No, not at all.
What? What do you mean not clear? What aren't you clear about? What aren't you clear about? Please answer my question.
Joo. En kykene ymmärtämään tuollaista ajattelua.
She cannot understand this kind of thinking.
What you mean is you don't like it. You can understand it. You're very intelligent. You heard every word I said. I'm not asking you to believe me. Of course you can understand it. It's just that because you're not used to thinking it, you don't like it, so you're blocking your mind to it. I'm not asking you to believe me, but it's not complicated English what I'm saying. So of course you can understand it. Tara, did you understand me? I'm not asking you to believe me.
Mm-hmm.
It can be stupid, it can be nonsense. You don't have to believe it, but you can hear every word I said.
Yes.
So then, of course, you can understand. But that's the answer to your question. That's what a spirit is.
I don't believe.
Well, then you have no basis for not belief.
Yes.
You can believe you pray to Chitamani Tara, you believe in her, why not believe in a bad one? What's the difference? Believing is not the point. Don't believe. Believe is superstition. Think about it. You're an intelligent person. You can think about the possibility. Buddha is either completely crazy and is making up a stupid story for you, or it's true. But you don't believe or not believe. Belief is not the point. We need to use our intelligence to think about how it's possible. That's the point. You don't have to think about it. You can say you don't like it. That's perfectly fine. But the intelligent one is to think, well, how interesting. I will look into that. Wouldn't you agree with that approach?
Mm-hmm.
Much less fear-based, wouldn't you think? Tara!
Paljon vähemmän pelkoon perustuvaa tällainen lähestymistapa, että tutkii ja analysoi itse.
Yeah. So the only way to understand it is to think about the whole Buddhist view, about the mind, the four elements, all the things I'm talking about, this whole Buddhist worldview. That's the only way you can comprehend how even theoretically this is possible. But if you take the materialist view of the world, this view is impossible. I agree. They crash. The only way to comprehend intellectually how this is a possibility is the view of Buddhism about the mind not being physical, the view of karma, the view of the four elements, all these things I've been talking about. These are the elements of this worldview. And within that worldview, this is coherent and logical. But you don't have to accept it. But it's up to you to decide if you want to think about it.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
Good. Yeah.
May I ask one question?
Yeah.
About you talked about animal realm.
Yeah.
And earlier you said that different realms are states of mind.
They're all states of mind. They're all minds, yeah. Consciousnesses.
I have been kind of wondering, in human realm, we see also people who are kind of more like just pleasing their own desires,
Yeah, so what's your question?
the question is that, is it so that animal realm can appear also
No,
in
that's
humans?
just, no, that's, I know what you're saying is humans have animal qualities.
Yes.
Well, join the club, dear. Having any wish for sex, for food, for sleep, that's animal action. That's not human. Human qualities are virtuous. And the rebirth we have now in Buddhist view of the history of the universe is a completely degenerate, deluded time. We're walking around looking like animals born on this planet. All the habits we have of sleep, eat, food, sex, they're animal activities, darling. So it's not just some people. They are animal activities we brought with us from being in the animals. The only ones that are human are the virtues in us. This is a shocking concept to us, you know. We're all got animals, but that's not what Buddha's talking about. Have you not noticed animals in this world? There are beings called animals, but we all have animal activities. Of course we do. Look at us.
Yeah, but that's what I mean.
But then that's
Kind
the
of
answer.
Basically, partly in the animal realm.
No, it's not. That's
we
just
are-
too confusing.
Okay.
That's too. You don't need to say it
Alright.
like that.
So in that case, realms are more like concrete, like animals are animals.
Well, can you notice a dog is a dog? You try and tell the dog. Try and tell the dog about it.
A dog is a dog, but I can see also humans.
But
who
that
are
is. It's a different.
behaving like
Okay.
dogs, almost like.
Excuse me. I just agreed with you. So why are you wanting to think it's an animal realm? A realm is a type of rebirth. Are you a human or not? A human means you got access to some virtue. Have you got access to some virtue inside you?
Possibly,
So that's.
hopefully.
Well, you wouldn't be sitting in that chair if you didn't, darling.
Yeah.
Very simple. A dog, I've noticed there's no dogs who come to the course. I've noticed there's no dogs who ask questions.
Actually, I brought my dog.
Well, that's fine. He gets some imprints, but he can't think about it. It's obvious there's a realm called human, and there's all kinds of humans in that realm. Some are closer to animals, and some are closer to gods. Some are closer to Buddhas, obviously, but you can still determine there's a group called humans. There's a group called animals. There's a group called spirits. It's clear, isn't it?
Yeah, sure.
Do you see what I'm saying?
I see what you're saying, but then it confuses me if you say.
Okay, but
that
darling,
the
no,
realms
no,
are
no,
the
no,
mind,
no,
and
sweetheart.
then they are
Your
animals.
confusion is your lack of clarity about the definitions.
Probably.
Not probably, is, in fact.
Okay.
So let's just get clear, using this model here, what an animal, what a realm means. It's a type of rebirth that is predominantly a certain energy. So if you're born as a dog, you can only access your non-virtue.
Okay.
If you're born as a human, even though the lowest level human, there's still some human qualities there. Some, if you're lucky. Maybe closer to animals, I agree, but there's no conflict about that. If you understand that Buddha's view of the mind refers to all living beings. And so there's a quality of a God realm, which is incredible bliss. The quality of a being who is a God is extraordinarily blissful because their body's not gross, so their mind is quite subtle and is extreme bliss. Well, we can experience bliss as a human, but it's not as blissful as a God because our bodies aren't light. Then we go to the other spectrum. You can see there is a thing called an animal, but a human can access that type of activity. Most humans have animal activities. It's called sex and food. So there's no contradiction, though. Can you see my point?
Yes.
Good, darling. Yes.
Thank you very much.
So, like God's, if you're reborn in a God's realm,
Yeah.
sooner or later you exhaust.
That's right. The karma runs out.
So
yes.
the same happened for the
Animals,
dog's
yes,
realm. So
that's
you
right.
cannot do anything because they have no access to virtue.
But you can help the dog
You
by
can
saying
help them.
prayers and it's here. At some point, we were in the animal realm. Look at us, now we're human. So clearly we can deduce we came from the animal to the human.
If you have a special attachment to
Did you hear what I said?
Yes, I heard.
So we have to ask the question, Fabrizio, how you help an animal activate their virtuous karma at the time of their death. That's one of the major points here about helping animals at the time of death. Don't just kill your animal because it's suffering and take it to the vet and say you're putting it to sleep. You let it go through its suffering. You listen to, have mantras playing so it can hear it. It sees you, who it's attached to, but you make it peaceful and virtuous, and that can help activate a virtuous karmic seed in your little dog or your cat or even the rat, so it can get a human birth after it dies. It's the most precious gift you can give your animal, you know. This is the most precious thing you can do for your animal at the time of their death. At least help it activate virtue so it can get a human birth. So what's your question?
My question was if you are very close or feel a lot of empathy for certain animals.
What do you mean by empathy? You mean
Empathy.
attachment?
No,
Excuse me, you mean attachment?
Attachment, okay.
That's a delusion, okay? Eventually we should have compassion for every single animal. But we've got certain attachment to certain animals. Some people do. So what's the question?
If you might be coming from that realm right recently, if you
Yeah, of course all of that. Yeah, of course. Some people just love spiders, some people love rats, some people love snakes. Yeah, be careful. Of course, that's right. But I mean, our attachment for animals is our pets, you know. It's disgusting how much we have so much attachment to our pets. I mean, it's going to be born as a dog or a cat. It's the perfect recipe. You know, we hate the rats, we love the poodles, you know. It's awful. We think everybody thinks their pet is so special. Oh, my pet sits with me when I meditate. Oh, it's such a special being. It's a lot of rubbish, you know. It's just attached to you, that's all. I'm not being mean. Pets are fine. But our attachment to them is horrible. It's revolting. Excuse me. I'm very blunt, so I agree. But hear my point. I mean, rats feel like your poodle, you know. So try to have compassion for all sentient beings. Anyway, excuse me. I'm getting angrier by the day goes by. Rougher and rougher and rougher. Any more questions? What's next? We've got a few things to talk about yet. Hang on. Sorry. What day is it? What time is it? Okay. So now next, what are we up to here? Thinking about the suffering. Okay, thinking about the suffering of the lower realms, which sounds hilarious to us, is this next logical deduction to come to a conclusion we come to when we think about death. I could die at any moment, and karmic seeds in my mind could ripen as a lower realm rebirth. So the conclusion from this is, well, thank you very much. I would rather not be born a dog, a rat, a spirit, not to mention a hell being, which is even more abstract. If she doesn't like spirits, she's going to definitely not like hell beings. We won't go there. But she doesn't mind Buddhas, so that's okay. One end of it's okay. So to think of it as I think it's extremely helpful. This helps us really break down these very vivid ideas we have of what an animal is, what a human is. If we take this view, that Buddha's view of the mind, like I'm saying, refers to all living beings, all the delusions there are very evident. We can see it in humans and we can see them in animals. The virtues, we can see them in humans. You can't very rarely see them in animals. We think they've got virtue, but it's mostly attachment. They do create some virtue, like domestic animals, you know, because they're peaceful, they're living around humans, they're very attached to us. So the thing is, this is a story, like I mentioned about the Lama Zopa saying the dog, if you just saw their mind for a few moments, the suffering would be so intense. We don't see that at all. So this is where it takes time to think. The suffering of animals we do see is when they're hurt. That's when we can see the suffering. But we can't see suffering when it comes to the mental state. You know, and that's something very interesting to think about, I think. The intensity of the mental suffering of an ordinary animal, which is the suffering of ego grasping. So if you can think of your ego grasping, if you can think of the fear and panic and anxiety that causes in ordinary daily life, the nightmare of fear, then they've got that 1 billion times more strong. 1 billion times more strong. Because they can't access any virtue, because they have virtually no wisdom, which is the wisdom that understands interdependence and emptiness, then they only have fear. They only have paranoia and narrow-minded and totally fearful. So their life is like a nightmare. It's very helpful to think this way, I think. So you think of rats poodles, whatever you like. Think of the intensity of the mental suffering. And if we can even begin to understand this, then the natural consequence would be, well, thank you very much. I do not want to be born a poodle. I do not want to be born a bird. I don't want to be born an eagle who only wants to rip the flesh out of fish. I don't want to be born a mother lion who only wants to rip the flesh out of buffaloes for breakfast every day with complete ignorance of any suffering that she's causing. Thank you, I don't want that suffering. It's not too difficult to think this way, but we've got to go beyond our narrow view of what we think a person is. Okay, we might not like the idea of spirits, of course, it doesn't fit with our materialist model at all. So it's really helpful, I think, to open our minds to this different view if we want to. If we say we like Buddhism, this is part of Buddha's view, you know, it's all in the teachings, it's all there. And it's helpful for our minds not to have fear, I think. It's helpful to open our mind to the possibility of other things, to see it as a hypothesis, you know, instead of just following our ignorance and our fears and believing in something we like and not believing in something we don't like, which is how most people think of religion. It's good for the mind, I think. And so this one, certainly thinking of the suffering of the lower realms, then this is said to be a very powerful impetus to then think, well, okay, I don't want to be born that way when I die. I don't want to have any, and not to mention the suffering of even having bad things happen even in a human life. Then you think, well, whom can I turn to? Whom can I rely upon to give me the methods to not have this type of rebirth? And this is the next step, is where one turns to take refuge. This is the classic way of presenting it. So the whole idea of refuge is, they use the analogy of a doctor, and it's quite helpful. You know, there are two things involved in order to go to a doctor. The first obvious one has to be that you don't want suffering. You either are sick now and you want to get better, you want to get methods to stop you suffering, or you want to get methods to stop you from future suffering. And that's more this one here. So you think, I don't want future suffering. And this takes time for us to think, you know. Even the idea that if I lie will create the cause for me to be lied to, even that is abstract for us. Which is why the whole view of karma really does take time to internalize. But the idea that my being negative will cause me to be born a dog, that's even more ridiculous for us. So one has to think about it. And the only way to think about it is to take the Buddha's view of what the mind is, what physical level is, all this stuff we're talking about, because that's the nuts and bolts of this view. We can't squeeze it into our materialist view because it won't fit. And it's not a question of believing it, like I said. Believing is not relevant. That's just emotion. If you like it, you'll believe in it. If you don't like it, you won't. It's meaningless. It's either right or it's wrong. It's for us to find out. This is the approach, best one, you know. So, if I don't want suffering, and we know we don't want suffering, okay, that is clear. Whatever we mean by suffering, we know we don't want it. But the crucial point here with Buddha and karma is that the causes of it are done by me. The causes of it are done by me. That's the meaning of karma, which is a really extra tasty level. Normally we all know we don't want suffering, but we usually think it's something else that causes it, you know. But here it's the idea that karma is the thing. So what we're trying to get here is a strong sense of renunciation. Renunciation's got two parts. The first one has to be the recognition, I am suffering. And I'm sick of suffering. That's got to be the first step. I'm suffering and I'm sick of suffering. That is clear. We're all sick of suffering. But the second one is the point. Now I know why I'm suffering. Karma and delusions. And this takes time. And then when we know it's karma and delusions, my karma and my delusions, that I'm the boss, that I'm the one who did it, this is what brings this powerful sense of, God, I'm sick of this. What can I do to stop it? That's renunciation. And that's where we turn to the Buddha. So Buddha's like our doctor. It's a good analogy. So the first step is you've got to know you're sick of suffering and you know the causes. Well, not quite yet. When it comes to these steps of refuge, we haven't got to the causes yet. We've got to the thought, I'm sick of suffering. And you actually don't know the causes yet. This is the interesting point. In this usage, in this way of describing in the Lam Rim, the first step is, I don't want suffering. You go to the doctor. Then the doctor, whom you rely upon, then they will tell you the causes. And that's where you start to learn about karma, actually. So it's step by step, in this way I'm describing here. Your first step is, oh my God, I don't want suffering. I don't want to be born in the lower realms. I don't want to be born to have bad things happen. You know you don't want this. This is just like gut level. So you turn to the Buddha. You rely upon the Buddha. So the second part of going to a doctor, you just don't go to anybody. You just do your research and check up that the doctor's a valid doctor, please. You can't rely on any old Joe. So when it comes to here, we have to check on the Buddha. And that's up to us. Buddha's happy. He's found his way. He's not trying to force us. He's out there, all his teachings are there, all the research is there, all the information is there, the practitioners are there. It's up to us to do our market research, to read the teachings, to think about the Buddha, to look at the people who practice it, to listen to the stuff, to look at to look at the teachers. All of this is the evidence of the stuff called Buddhism, and that's up to us. We have to be confident. Nothing to do with believing in Buddha, nothing to do with belief. But looking at him, using your intelligence, just think if there's something valid there. And until you have some confidence there's something valid there, then you're not ready to be a Buddhist. You have got to be confident. You have to be confident. You are the one here, the boss, not Buddha. He's content. That doctor's happy. He's done his work. You have to now be confident that's a good doctor. And that can only come from your research. Reading, thinking, analysing, processing it. So when you feel that's time, ready, you're confident, that's when you formally take refuge. So the bottom line for refuge, basically, is you have this recognition you're sick of suffering, and that takes time for us. Not to mention the gross suffering, but like we talked yesterday, the subtler level of suffering, all the delusions, the inner prison, as Lama Zopa talks about it. You're sick of this, and you have some sense of karma. You're taking it on board as your hypothesis. You know you don't want suffering. So then you have this basis for turning to this doctor, whom you will then rely upon. So you have three things you rely upon. As you know, they talk about the three jewels. Just their term. The Buddha, the Dharma, the Sangha. So let's look at what that means. So the traditional way of talking about the Buddha, as I said, the real Buddha, they talk about absolute Buddha and relative Buddha. Absolute Dharma and relative Dharma. Absolute Sangha and relative Sangha. And it's not complicated. Let's just look at it. So, like I mentioned, I think the first day, yesterday, wasn't it? I haven't been here for a week, have I? No. Feels like it. Okay. So the word Buddha actually refers to what they call absolute Buddha, which means the pure, unmanifest, all-pervading, all-knowing, omniscient, blissful, clear, compassionate consciousness. The mind that's fully enlightened, which in its nature is pure and unmanifest. It is actually very similar to the way people talk about God. God is all-knowing, all-seeing, all-pervasive, right? The difference is in the interpretation of those energies, That's the point. So you could argue there's one Buddha. You could argue, not getting too complicated here, one all-pervading, all-knowing, compassionate mind, known in Sanskrit, if you've heard the word, the Dharmakaya. Truth, technically called truth body, kind of abstract, But that's the real meaning of Buddha. That's actual Buddha. So from the side of that being who has become a Buddha, they don't need a big bag of bones like this. They don't need a body. That's absurd. When we think of Buddha, we think of Mr. Buddha, the Shakyamuni with a lump on his head, sitting there looking holy and a monk, isn't it? That's the relative Buddha. That's the relative Buddha. But the fact is, if you're living at the time of India, we look now very happily at the picture of the Buddha. Is that the Buddha up there? Hang on. Can't see without my glasses. Yeah, there he is. With his blue hair and his curls and everything, his long ears. So, if we were thinking about it, we look at the Buddha, we go, oh yeah, there's the Buddha. Oh yeah, I know he's the Buddha. Oh, I'm sure if I met the Buddha, I'd know the Buddha. Well, I'm sorry, go back to India 2,500 years ago. What you'd see is some bloke, like thousands of other blokes, all walking around with a yellow robe, some homeless person. You couldn't tell a Buddha from the bar of soap. Because we can't see by looking. You understand my point? You can't see the absolute Buddha. No way, we can't communicate with pure consciousness. But this is the point. The relative Buddha, out of immense compassion, a person who's become the Dharmakaya, remember Buddha says everyone can become it, a person who's accomplished Buddhahood, from their side they don't need a body, but because what's propelled their becoming a Buddha, based upon the wisdom, is their immense compassion. So compassion means, what can I do to help sentient beings? Well, there's no point in sitting here blissing out in being a pure consciousness. I better take a bag of bones so they can see me and hear me. So Buddha takes a form, a human form. That's the relative Buddha. That's the one we rely upon. Because we can hear him and see him and listen to him and contact him. And that relatively really meaning is the meaning of the Guru. That's the meaning of Guru. The human manifestation of the Buddha for you. Because like I said, we wouldn't have seen the Buddha back then. We couldn't tell. You can just see a human being. We're not clairvoyant. People often say the Dalai Lama is a Buddha. And I'm sure I don't know if it's true or not, but anybody I respect says he's a Buddha. Good enough. I know he's a very nice person. I can't tell him he's a Buddha. To say, oh, he's the Buddha is a joke. But I can have confidence he's a Buddha, and that's the practice we talked yesterday about confidence in the Guru as the Buddha. That's a different discussion. But knowing a person is the Buddha, that's impossible. Impossible. Because you're not clairvoyant, you can't see. So this is why we have to have this confidence, to cultivate a view that he is the Buddha, because that will help us. We can't say he's the Buddha. We can believe he's the Buddha, you can have faith he's the Buddha, but you can't say you know he's the Buddha. That means you're equal level, it's not possible. So the relative Buddha is Shakyamuni Buddha, Mr. Buddha of 2,500 years ago, whose teachings are in the teachings, whose teachings historically we are practicing. That's the relative Buddha, and that's the one we need, because we can hear the words, and that's the second one, that's the Dharma. So the absolute Dharma, if you think about it, is the actual knowledge in the mind of a Buddha and all the other, what they call superior beings. So you're a superior being from the first second of your non-conceptual insight into emptiness, like we talked yesterday. When you first get the direct, non-conceptual, genuine, experiential insight or knowledge of emptiness. Way to go, okay? From that second, you become what's called a superior being. From that second, you can't go back. You can only go forward. So Buddha says for eons, we've had the highest of rebirths. We've been wheel-turning kings. We've been amazing spiritual practitioners. We've had samadhi for eons. We've been spiritual practitioners. We've been clairvoyant. We've had unbelievable powers. But we've never realized emptiness. So until we get emptiness, we're going to continually go up and down like yo-yos in the realms of existence. So it's the realization of emptiness that's so crucial, the turning point, the paradigm shift that our mind has to make. So anybody who's got this first non-conceptual insight into emptiness all the way up to Buddhahood, they're called superior beings. So they're the absolute, the knowledge in their minds is the absolute Dharma, the real Dharma. So you think of it as the example of music, I think of Bach, let's say. The actual music is in Bach's mind. The actual music, the knowledge of music is in Bach's mind. That's where it really exists. But you can't access that. So how kind Mr. Bach is, he writes it down on little funny little notes on a piece of paper, doesn't he? That's the relative Dharma, because that's what I can hear, so I can access my music now. I can't access his mind. I need the relative Dharma. That's the words of the Buddha. That's the real Dharma. And that's why they talk about the power of speech. That's why speech is so powerful for us humans, and why refraining from negative speech is so intense, so amazing, so special, because you begin to purify your speech. Then your speech can have power and can benefit sentient beings. If we, due to past karma, due to past lying, for example, in past lives, people now just don't believe our words. Due to past gossiping, blur blur, people hear you talk and they're just bored. Your words have no value. Just those two alone, look in our lives. You're saying the truth, no one believes you. You know what you're saying is important, no one even listens to you. Your words have no value. This is from past karma, lying and gossiping, just two. From past harsh speech, even if you're speaking nicely, people think you're being rude. The way we constantly get misinterpreted. All this is from speech, Living around people who are abusing all the time, from harsh speech, from wrong speech, so much of it. So purifying your speech, and also because of the intimate relationship between our physical body and our mind, this is the Vajrayana and the Tibetan medical system, when you stop saying negative words, already you are purifying your subtler physical energies. And then when you start to say virtuous words, wise words, not to mention mantra, you are literally purifying your physical energy. And then literally when you're a holy being, your words can heal people. Even now, Lama Zopa says, because of the power of mantra, you just say a mantra and then you blow on a bone that's 1,000 years old. The consciousness that did live there once, and because of the power of mantra and your breath being blessed by mantra, the being who lived in that bone can get benefit. In Tibet one year, Lama Zopa went there with all his students to go to Tibet, and Tibetans can recognize a Lama from 1,000 feet, They're running, mobbing Lama Zopa. And he's blowing and spitting like crap. They use their spit to heal, and their breath. So, of course, in the spit, it's not so cool in the West. You're spitting on people, not going to. But it's because their energy, their mind is pure, their physical body is pure, because of the intimate relationship between body and mind. And not just that, their words have power. They say at the time of the Buddha, because of who he was, the Buddha teaching, and all these beings, all these great beings, ripe and ready for realizations. Just hearing the Buddha's words, getting realizations every minute, because the power of speech is so intense. We go to His Holiness. You can hear his words. Many people say the same words as the Dalai Lama, but look at the difference. We can hear it because we know those words are coming from realizations. That's the power of speech. So by protecting our speech, not bad-mouthing, not vomiting out what we feel, not blah, blah, not polluting our speech, we help purify our speech. And then when we learn to get some wisdom, our speech can benefit sentient beings. Then people will do what we want. Then we can be useful. Bodhisattvas, Power of speech is huge, very powerful. That's Buddha's main gift, his speech. That's the relative Dharma. You can hear, right? Isn't it? Mm-hmm. You can hear. You can read the Dalai Lama's books. You go to his teaching for the first time. The difference is stupendous. It's the same. You listen to a record, but you go to some master class of some great musician. It's so powerful. That's the point of a guru. The embodiment of the qualities in front of you. Tennis, doesn't matter what the thing is you're learning. Having a living embodiment of music or tennis or whatever it is living in front of you, telling you, it's far more powerful than merely reading a book. That's the point of a guru, and that's the power of speech also. So clear. So refuge. I'm going off the topic a bit, but refuge, the relative Dharma. The relative Dharma is the speech. The books, the CDs, the MP3 players, the videos, The absolute Sangha is those superior beings. But you can't tell who they are. They could be the homeless person down the road looking like some smelly person. Could be a highly evolved being. You can't tell. So the relative Dharma is the Sangha, the ordained ones. And for the Buddha, that's a really crucial point. The existence of the living Dharma in one place for the Buddha is represented by the presence of 4 fully ordained people. So the real Dharma is in one place, indicated by the presence of real superior beings, genuine meditators, actual living beings. The lovely word in Tibetan, the Dalai Lama's name, Tenzin, knowledge holder. Knowledge holder. Genuine knowledge, internal. The presence of them, that's where the Dharma really exists. I think I mentioned to you the meditator, Venerable Rene. I interviewed him in Mandala magazine. I mentioned yesterday, and I mentioned one of the points he discussed about how even at the 5th of the 9 stages he experienced bliss. Remember that? Well, the other thing he said to me was this. He said he was at Ursel Ling, this place, the place of clear light, named by His Holiness in 1982, where people meditate up in the mountains, an FPMT centre. And he was there for 18 months, he said. And he knew his mind couldn't get more subtle. He couldn't get past the 5th stage. So anyway, I was interviewing him at Kopan Monastery, which if anybody's been there is very busy. It's in a mountain, a hill, but it's surrounding this busy valley, Now so busy with people, and there's dogs and there's music every morning. It's loud and noisy. But Kathmandu Valley in general is really praised by all the holy beings as being an incredibly holy place. Very blessed by the presence of great meditators, which is not visible to the eyes. And so they all say one of the best places to meditate is where previous meditators have existed. Well, Rene told me when I interviewed him for Mandala, he was at Kopan when I interviewed him, he said his mind got more subtle more easily at Kopan, which is busy, than it did in the mountains in Spain. The indication being that it's a more blessed place. So this is where a place is blessed by the presence of the real superior beings, meditators. That's the real indication of the presence of Dharma. But according to the Buddha's own teachings, the 3 jewels at the relative level, the indicator of the presence of living Dharma in one place is the presence of at least 4 fully ordained monks or nuns, which is why the Sangha, the ordained Sangha, are considered so precious in Buddhism. And I always quote this story as what I've heard. Apparently years ago, India, there was some naughty king who was killing off all the Sangha, and they didn't have a quota. They need 10 people for an ordination. And they were so desperate to keep the Dharma alive in Tibet, so they had to sneak over the border from China, some Chinese monk, to get the quota so they can continue having ordinations. So apparently he must have worn blue, because this thing we have here is out of respect to that Chinese monk, keeping the Dharma alive in Tibet, That's how they talk. So Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, absolute relative. The 3 jewels. And they use the analogy of you rely upon the doctor, the medicine, and the helpers, the community, spiritual community. So we broadly will say this is our Sangha. But the strict meaning of Sangha is in terms of being one of the three jewels, is the ordained ones. So traditionally they would say that the basis of wanting to take refuge is these two things, of not wanting the future suffering and of having confidence in the Buddha. So I would say, in our terms, this is my way of saying it, especially if we've come from a Christian background, you'd have to be ready to feel you want to take refuge. It means, putting it this way, it means you'd have a real sense of comfort with the idea of no creator. Some people have a strong connection with the concept of a creator. Well, then you're not ready to be a Buddhist if that's the case. You can like Buddha, no problem. Because Buddha does not assert a creator. You don't need a creator, he says. But it doesn't mean you don't have faith and devotion. There's no question. The same, but it's different. So if you don't have a sense of comfort zone, you need to have a comfort zone with Buddha not being a creator, and then Buddha being a regular guy who can become a Buddha. And that means that you can have that potential. And that means a comfort zone with at least theoretically, with the idea of continuity of consciousness, with the idea of karma, we create our own reality, this type of things. The basic Buddhist nuts and bolts. That you have a sense of comfort with that, and a preparedness to go into it more deeply and use it as the basis for your life. That's really what determines a person as a Buddhist, relying upon the Buddha Dhamma Sangha to do that. So then, okay, there's various, when you take refuge formally, as I mentioned, some people have asked me, so we're going to, if people want, we can do it at the end of the day, offer refuge and the lay vows, up to people who want. But the crucial point is you've got to be confident the person you take it with will become one of your spiritual teachers. So you've got to be prepared for that. And that's up to you. That's your decision. So the refuge, when you take refuge in the Buddha Dhamma Sangha, you're committing yourself to various things. There's a document I prepared that if you do it, I will send it to you that has all this listed out, all very clear. There's various commitments you're taking. The first one is you're committing yourself to take refuge 3 times in the morning and 3 times at night. It's a reminder, Even if you say, I take refuge in the Buddha Dhamma Sangha 3 times. You have a commitment to make offerings to the Buddha. So that's often accomplished very nicely, and it's helpful to your practice to have what's called an altar, and you have images of the Buddha and you make offerings on it. And there's a formal kind of style. You can do this style if you want, but it's very helpful to have this because it's a reminder of your refuge, And an altar has the representations of the body, speech, and mind of the enlightened beings, a statue or a picture of your Lama. Speech is represented by a book or a text or holy words, and Dharma represented by, representation of 3 body, speech, and mind. So body is the statue or the picture, speech is the book, and mind is represented by a stupa. And then you would make your offerings, and this is a traditional offering we have. This has actually come from Vajrayana, the 8 sense offerings. Or you can just offer lights, you can offer fruit. But it's really nice to start your day that way. Take refuge, make an offering. It reminds you. Then you can sit down and do even a practice if you like, but bare minimum this. You're committing to love sentient beings. We'll try and talk some compassion wing after lunch. Love is, may sentient beings be happy. Try and want to make sentient beings happy. Begin there. Try and study some Dharma. There's about 5 or 6 things you commit to. Then in particular, in relation to the Buddha Dhamma Sangha, you have certain commitments. In relation to Buddha, you're committing to try to cultivate sort of a pure view about all objects that represent the Buddha. Rather than say you put your green Tara over there because it fits with your curtains, or you have this beautiful Buddha here because she's so expensive. You try not to see it in materialist or artistic terms, but rather in spiritual terms, that it's actually a representation of the Buddha. And you cultivate this view. And it's for your sake, not the Buddha. He doesn't mind. It's an attitude that causes something virtuous in your mind. Then you have an attitude towards the Dharma that you would respect. Like the same with the Buddha. You wouldn't put it on the ground. You wouldn't sit on it. You'd respect it. And the same with the books. The books are your most precious offering. They're your actual Dharma. Your refuge. Actual refuge is the books. So Tibetans put the books highest of all, because that's where your medicine is. So you try and respect your spiritual books, not just treat it like a regular book. And this is an attitude we understand. If you've got a beautiful picture framed nicely of your beloved friends, your family, you'd be very insulted if someone sat on it on the floor or chucked it in a drawer. Even though it's only a photo, you'd be insulted. Well, it's the same attitude of developing respect for the Buddha and the Dharma and the Sangha by respecting the images, respecting the books, and then in relation to the Sangha, a genuine respect for anyone living in ordination, because they're keeping the Dharma alive by their presence. Just cultivating this attitude, That's roughly refuge. So, any questions about that? For anyone, especially if you're interested in doing it for the first time. Or if not. Come on, you people. Questions! You must have some questions. I don't believe you haven't. Yes, what's your question?
You've been speaking about respect towards monastics, let's say people who are ordained.
Because they represent the Dharma, that's why.
Yes, but as far as I remember in the text, it is said that you should respect the monks' clothes as well.
Yeah, that's right, they should. Sorry, I forgot that, yeah. You should even respect the robe, because it represents the Sangha, yeah. You would.
For example, if you come to India, you see some people who evidently dress up as monks.
I don't know about that. Darling, I'm not interested in all that. I don't know. That's something. So what?
So what attitude would you...
Well, so they're not monks. It's very simple. I mean, they're not monks. She's wearing robes, but she's not a nun, so these are not robes. What?
It's a juba.
Yeah, it's not robes. That's not robes. So what are you saying? What's the question? The actual
People who
question.
dress up like monks
I know, but what's your actual question, darling?
Like what attitude can you have?
To whom?
To these people.
What people? What are these people?
Who are wearing monks' clothes to...
But they're not monks' clothes if they're wearing them. They're just pieces of red cloth. What's your question, though?
So monks' clothes are clothes...
Okay, darling, what's your question? I'm so sorry. Forgive me. What's your question? I'm being a bit rough here. What's your question?
What attitude can you have to the people who dress up like monks in order to deceive people?
What the hell do you think attitude you would have? Use your common sense and your wisdom. What do you think? What are you asking me for? What attitude would you have if someone's cheating you? What's your reasonable attitude, darling?
So you don't have to... let's say
Sweetheart, I refuse to answer that question. You're more intelligent than that. Come on, you're being superstitious. That's ridiculous. If a person is lying, and you're telling me you're thinking you're supposed to value their robes because they're lying, what are you talking about?
Okay.
Sweetheart, come on. I mean, okay, what's the reason you would respect a robe? What's the reason for your mind? What's the benefit for your mind? If you see a piece of red cloth on the ground and you respect it, what would be the benefit for you? What's the purpose of this? What's the point?
Well, maybe as a symbol.
What's the point for you? You're doing it. You're picking it up and you're valuing it. They say a person who sees a bit of red cloth will pick it up and put it on the tree and put it up high. What's the practice for your mind? How is that virtuous for you? That's the point to ask yourself, and then that'll answer your question. Why are you doing that?
Well, to show respect to the symbol of something that...
Meaningless. You're doing an action, right? So that's your action, isn't it? So that means something in your mind is happening. What would be your mind thinking when you see a piece of red cloth and you decide to pick it up and put it up high? What is your mind thinking when you do that? What does that red cloth represent? Thank you. So when you think, oh my God, there's a piece of red cloth, that reminds me of the Sangha, the third one called the Sangha jewel. And because I'm a Buddhist, I want to respect that. So then that's virtue for you, isn't it? Is that virtue for you?
Yes.
Well, that's the answer. So if you see a liar wearing a true monk's robe, yes, you can value the robe, but what's it got to do with the price of fish? The guy's lying. Punch him in the nose. Take his clothes off him. Tell him to go away. I'm sorry, shouting and yelling. It's increasing as the day goes by. Are you seeing my point? Yeah. Get the meaning of the action. There's an action every second. The cloth is nothing. It's nothing. A book is nothing. It's toilet paper. But your mind gives it meaning. Your mind sees it as valuable. Your mind treats it like a treasure. You are creating virtue. The book doesn't care. The cloth doesn't care. The monk doesn't care. It's a practice for your mind to grow virtue. Can you see that? That's the point of it. That's the only point. Okay. Someone else before we have lunch? Yes.
Robina,
Hello.
I work with people who have very...
I missed the first part of your sentence.
I work with people who have very big problems,
yes.
mental problems, mental disease,
yes.
like schizophrenia, for example, different manias. Yeah.
Yes.
Can you give me advice and what is right way to help them to achieve the best rebirth?
Oh, sweetheart, there's so many ways. I mean, each person's different. You know that.
Yes.
So then,
right.
you know, with some people you can see, can't you, that you can give advice. With other people, you can't give advice. So with some people, all you can do is protect them, to stop them from harming others. With some people, you are loving to them. With some people, you are firm. I can't give a simple answer. You know this as well as I do.
But if I see is that people don't understand.
But you don't give them advice, dear. With no point. Well, how do you help them? What's your job with them?
Now, for example, I'm like practical nurse. I'm take my job is them. But what is the difference? We speak about what is the difference with people and animals. In this, they think it's like.
Are they in a hospital scenario? They're in
Yes,
hospital.
Right.
So, darling, how do you help them? What's your job anyway? How do you help them? What do you do every day?
Practical nurse.
Yeah, what do you do for them every day?
Different jobs. With
You
them.
wipe their
For
bottom, you put them in
example,
bed, what do you do?
Yeah.
Well, good, you help them. You're being kind and loving to them. You're making them feel safe. That's one way you cannot help. You make them feel safe, yeah? You show them kindness? Do you show them kindness? Or are you
Yes,
rude to them?
Yes.
You bash them up. Huh? Sweetheart?
No, I don't understand it. It's more,
What?
What is this right way?
God Almighty, I'm trying to answer you. I am answering you, darling. I think already, excuse me, please forgive me. Am I making you nervous by shouting? Excuse me. Yes. Excuse me, darling. There's two ways to help sentient beings. There's the wisdom wing, and then there's a compassion wing. So wisdom is you, in your mind, having some understanding of what's in front of you. So the more you have understanding of that person's mind, the more you have wisdom to understand that person's mind, the more that gives you the ability to know how to benefit them. Would you first agree with that?
Okay. This point is the difficult point is understand what is
Precisely. So you could, therefore, if you don't have much wisdom and you can't interpret their mind, what their problem is, what the karma they created, why are they experiencing this, if you don't have that wisdom, then you can't help them very much, can you? But the next one is you can at least be kind. You can be generous. You can make them feel safe. You can lessen their fear. Don't underestimate this. This is an unbelievable gift to poor suffering human beings. So I think already you're doing this. So already you are helping them, is my point to you. Are you being kind to these people?
Yes.
You don't beat them up.
No.
You don't shout at them like I'm shouting. You're kind to them. Well then, darling, you could not do more. Because if you can't give them advice, you can be kind. Alleviate their pain, their suffering, their fear, because they're living in tormented fear, aren't they? Their minds are fearful. Would you agree?
Yes, thank you.
Would you agree with that? They're fearful. Much fear, isn't it?
Yes.
So by making them calm and you being kind and showing kindness and smiling and also being firm, depending, if they trust you, you are already helping them like you cannot believe. Now the other one is, if it's reasonable for you, do you know any mantras? Do you say things like mantras? Do you know things like this?
Yes, I use it sometimes, but I don't know.
Then this is the most powerful way you can help them. You can walk around in the ward and you can be singing mantras. Just by hearing it, you put imprint in their mind, and this can help them for this life and countless future lives. This is long-term benefit. Even for your dog is the same. This is an incredible way to help, long-term. You can't fix them now, but you can be kind and loving, and you can say mantra so they can hear it. This is incredible.
Thank you. I'm thinking about this.
But makes you nervous to say mantra. Why?
No, I say it because it's one is this.
Huh?
In this situation, when I working with these people alone, but if sometimes it's a different personnel around me, it's impossible.
But no, it's not impossible. Why does anybody think it's religion? You can be singing a nice tune.
Well, because in their opinion, it's a little bit strange.
Why?
Something
Singing a tune is strange?
Another language.
Wait a minute. Singing a little tune is strange? Who knows it's another language? They just hear this pleasant sound. Oh, money permit. They don't know it's another language. It looks like pleasant sound. Don't be nervous. Think about it.
Okay.
Don't worry too much of what other people think.
For personals, for doctors, it's a little bit strange. It's a little bit strange what I'm doing. No.
No, you can be skillful. Even if you get close to them, you whisper in their ear. Listen, you asked me the question, I'm giving you an answer. It's up to you if you want to use. I'm giving you some suggestions of how to help.
Well, I'm thinking about it.
Good.
Yes, sometimes use it, but you stay alone.
Anyway, never mind. It's up to how much you want to help. Be skillful. It's just being skillful. The helping short term, best one is give advice. If people can't hear advice, then you be kind. And then plus that, you put imprints in their mind for the future. And so it's up to you which level you want to do. It's up to you.
Thank you very much.
That's a pleasure. Thank you very much. Yes.
Another question about the helping people. Giving advice, is it okay if I haven't got enough wisdom?
Sweetheart. Okay, listen. Use ordinary examples.
Well,
No, I'm going to use ordinary examples.
you can.
Let's think of music. If a person asks you to show them how to play music, right? And you check, do I have the wisdom to know how to play music? And then if the answer is no, well then the answer has to be, I can't help you. But so if you know grade 1, you can help them with grade 1. But if you think you know grade 2, you are misleading them. So you have to know what your wisdom is, what level, and you help to that extent.
Okay, thank
So
you.
compassion is not enough, as His Holiness says. We need wisdom. And that's why always the first one. To the extent that you know any music, any football, or any dharma is the extent to which you can help.
Okay.
You have to have it very clear.
Yes, and another thing is if a person cannot receive advice, but they are they can take, for example, a gift. So would it help to give a gift of a mantra above the door, for example?
You have to know the person, darling. You have to know their mind.
Okay.
It's the answer every time. Same here. You can only, listen, if you've got a 2-year-old in front of you, if you don't know they're 2, you can't help them. You have to know what the mind is. This is an ordinary common communication between human beings. You have to have some ability to know the person in front of you. This is what we don't have. We go blur, blur, blur. No interest in what they want to hear. So you've got to have some awareness of this other person, what will be helpful to them. But we also have to be a little bit brave and not worry too much about what other people think. You know, also this one. Isn't it true? Be a bit courageous. Because mostly those doctors and those nurses, they're not worrying about you. They're worrying about themselves. So if you sneak in singing a mantra, they might think this weird nurse singing a mantra. They're not going to worry too much. I mean, you're not going to give a performance, you know. You're just going to sneak in with a few. Just being skillful is what I'm saying.
I lose a job.
Not if you give a performance, yes. Excuse me, I'm going to do some performing of mantras here, then yes. But if you sneak in quietly,
It's possible like a volunteer.
What?
But it's possible like a volunteer, but it's not having job.
Oh, darling, don't get nervous. Come on. Don't worry about it. Okay, so listen, can we just summarise? What?
Give an example
What of what?
of taking care of a deeply.
Do it over
unwell
lunchtime,
person.
please. Do it over lunchtime. I've got too many things to say. I'm sorry. You can do it over lunchtime. So listen, we've got to have lunch, but I want to make it short lunch because we want to talk about more. I want to talk about vows. I want to talk about purification, which is really important to finish the first stages of practice, which are the basis of our practice. And then I want to talk about a bit the compassion wing. And then we've got to do refuge and lay vows, which doesn't take long for those who do want it, if people are interested.
Bodhicitta wars?
Huh?
Bodhicitta wars?
Huh?
You're not going to do bodhicitta wars?
No, not today.
Okay.
Not. Unless people strongly want, who are ready. I don't think so, though. I didn't prepare for this. Most people haven't taken lay vows and refuge, have you? Most people? You have?
Is
have
it
no.
possible also to renew the vows?
Oh, of course, renewing is good to do. Very good to both vows and refuge. It's very good to
When
do.
you renew the vows, like you said, you take the person that gives you the
You have a relationship with that person. You've got to be confident with that person.
so you can renew. You can have more than one.
Oh, you can have many people as you like.
All right.
You can have an whole army of teachers. It's all right. Okay. So let's have some lunch, but let's just not rush, but just have your lunch and enjoy and discuss and talk, and then we come back. So whenever you're ready, you come and get me, and I'll be ready. 30, 45 minutes, whatever you think it takes. Quick discussion, quick lunch, and then come back and we finish. Is that okay?
Yes.
A sense of urgency, okay?